the podcast for potential development by and with Uli Vogel. A warm welcome, dear listeners, to our episode today, which I have titled Mental Health in the Workplace. Where do we stand in 2024? One of my very first episodes of this podcast, I think it was in October or November of last year, was already dedicated to mental health in the workplace, and I want to continue with this topic because it is just incredibly important and needs to be addressed accordingly. I want to talk about this topic because it can potentially affect every one of us, either directly or indirectly. I recently had another case in my close circle of friends, and it's truly tragic. You just can't believe it sometimes. It really can happen to anyone, and sometimes it even makes you a bit scared, so to speak. The number of people suffering from mental illnesses is at an all-time high. I'll say more about that in a moment. And in this episode, I'd like to share a few statistics, but most importantly, look at what we can actually do about it. What can companies do? What measures can you take? That's what I want to highlight a bit. And of course, this is all about the topic of values, just like our podcast is called Values, Impulses. And how can we unlock people's potential? And yes, if you're not mentally healthy, if you're ill or become ill, then by definition, it's basically no longer possible to fully realize your potential, or at least, it can even become destructive. So we need to keep that in mind as well. All right, the snippets. How do I want to structure this? So, first of all, the hard facts. We absolutely can't hide them. We can't conceal them. But of course, the facts also need to be put into perspective. So, that's the first point, to take a look at how things actually are, to put it casually. All right, the second thumbnail is, what approaches are there to counter this, ones that are at least somewhat scientifically proven, where the research literature can actually provide something? Of course, we'll also include the relevant links to the scientific literature here. I'll be discussing 4 points there. And then, third point, what else can we actually do beyond that? Which quickly brings us into the area of values, where at the end I'll also draw a conclusion and try to focus on the values that, in my opinion, are ultimately central, even if they're maybe not yet so sharply, scientifically measurable. Robert S. Hartman made some great early contributions and achieved a lot in this area. But I believe that if you approach this with common sense and a certain understanding of values, or even a sensitivity and awareness for values, then I think we're quickly able to make the connection between certain values and mental health, or, conversely, to mental impairment, especially when it comes to the environment that triggers such mental impairment. We're able to build that bridge. Okay, let's get started. So, absenteeism at the workplace is an issue in almost every company. But what are actually the main reasons, if we look at the statistics and ask, okay, which illnesses are they? And at the top of the list are actually respiratory illnesses at 17.5%. Yeah, well, we all know that, and my brother is a pharmacist. Actually, both my brothers are pharmacists, and I always say October is the busiest month because that's when it all starts. With the colds. Usually it doesn't last that long. Well, since COVID it's obviously different, but it's no surprise when you think about which seasons everyone is sniffling and coughing. And so on. 17.5%. But right behind that, at 17.4%, are musculoskeletal disorders. So that's, yeah, we all know about that, back pain and everything else that comes with it, and so on. But now, after the 17.5 and 17.4%, mental health disorders already come in at 10.3%. So, in third place. Then, after that, injuries follow at 8.1%. Then finally, diseases of the circulatory system at 4.0%. And then digestive system disorders at 3.3%, and it continues on from there. Mental health is in third place. And you probably notice that even without the statistics, because the topic is now on everyone's lips. What used to be a total taboo. Fortunately, a taboo topic is at least being discussed more openly today. But the question is, have we already made progress on this topic, and what further progress can we hopefully achieve? That's what I want to get into. So, what are the reasons? What makes us mentally ill? All right, now let's take a look at the number of days of work incapacity, the so-called ataboo topics. Sick days due to mental illnesses. And those have clearly increased over the past 10 years. So, in 2021, I have a figure here, 123.3 million days were lost due to psychological stress. You have to consider, Germany's population is 82 million, and there were 123.3 million days of work incapacity due to psychological stress. All right, and now for the comparison. In 2003, it was 45.4 million. So that's an increase of over 50%, well over 50%. Actually, it goes quite a bit further than that. Wait a second, that's actually over 100%. Of course, obviously. So, anyone who becomes mentally ill now is exposed to an increased risk. And it's also important to understand that it's not just the mental illness itself, but that it also increases the risk of developing physical illnesses. We all know how it goes with psychosomatics. That is, how things transfer from the mind to the body. And I mean, we as humans, as conscious beings, basically have to maintain two kinds of balance. First, the physical balance, which is called homeostasis in technical terms, meaning the absence of illness. And the other is the mental, psychological balance, what's called psychostasis. And these two are connected. So if I am mentally ill, I am also at a higher risk of developing physical illnesses, but also of living in social isolation, and to be affected by unemployment or poverty. And on top of that, those affected are often unable to work for a long time or for an extended period. A mental illness isn't just a cold, it's something more serious and therefore also more prolonged. Here's another number for you. Early retirements due to mental illnesses have increased from just over 52,000 in 2004 to nearly 70,000 in 2021. And a lot of people always say, yeah, it just wasn't diagnosed like that in the past. And yeah, maybe there's some truth to that to a certain extent, but that doesn't change the fact that, over the past 20 years, pressure has really built up in society. I mean, you could really get philosophical about it now. There are so many factors at play: media intensity, democracy, destabilization, and of course, social tensions that have become much stronger. But it's a fact, we just have to acknowledge it, that this is on the rise and that it's dangerous for our society, for each individual, and of course for the engine of prosperity in our society. Or, in other words, that people have what they need to live. So, with that in mind, the second point is that we need to consider what companies and the people within them can actually do about it. And I want to quickly focus on 4 thematic approaches that are also supported by research literature. As I mentioned earlier, this is all backed by scientific research. And what's interesting is the first point here, that's the cooperative climate. So, a good cooperative climate helps support mental health. And I think that's pretty obvious. So if I'm working alone somewhere in a silo or in an office cubicle, and I get a file put on my desk, and then I just pass it on afterwards, I'm more likely to start overthinking things and not have as much fun as I would if I were working in a team, when it's clear that in a company, a lot can be achieved through good cooperation, right? So, we don't really need to think about it for long. I recommend, dear listeners, that you look up Yves Morieux. So, YVES is the first name, Yves, and then MORIEUX, Morieux. He's a really great guy who has examined cooperation very closely in TED Talk videos and also works at the Boston Consulting Group. And he once very vividly. He explains this using the example of a women's 4x100-meter relay at the World Championships. And from that, you can already see quite clearly, in a relay, you have to cooperate. And it's really enlightening to take a look at it. And then you also notice, okay, where does cooperation get stuck, and where can I encourage it? And in science, cooperation is by no means something that just happens automatically. Maybe that used to happen automatically in human tribes 10 or 15,000 years ago because people depended on each other. But today, there are millions, even billions of us, and we've developed systems that actually work against cooperation. And that's why I recommend you take a look at it. That's point 1 of section 4.2. This part is about crisis management. So, of course, we often experience stress, and things don't always go as planned. At some point, every company ends up in a crisis. That's just part of it. And in recent years, we've basically had stacked crises, or polycrises. We're pretty much used to it by now, and the question is how to manage it. And that's where leadership really comes into play. It's all about the leaders. Of course, I know this myself too. When things really get tight, Isabel and I, my wife, we say something we picked up from a good friend many years ago, a lovely phrase, now we have to drive by sight. Yeah, everyone knows what that's like when you're driving in a storm. And that's it, driving by sight. Yeah, but that can only be temporary because otherwise, over time, it'll wear you down. And that's why I recommend to all of you, many of you probably know him, Stephen Covey. With his world-renowned book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he truly created something absolutely amazing. Break time equals 0.5s/, he shows very clearly, and honestly, his book functions more like a comprehensive workbook, exactly how you can set yourself up to handle difficult crises really well. Break time equals 0.5s/, he explains how to get through them, how to come out even stronger on the other side, but also how to strategically position yourself in such a way that the chances of those problems hitting you personally are significantly minimized in the long run. So, when it comes to crisis management, I'd like to come back to the topic of leadership within companies. It's so important how leaders actually manage these crises. And that's a lever that's also scientifically proven. The third point that's been confirmed in scientific research is creativity. And improvements that result from it, well, I can't really draw anything directly from my own experience there. So, I'm basically quoting the science here, but of course, I can imagine if I try to build a bridge. Yeah, so, if we say that we try to be especially creative in companies to get things moving, then you can definitely make a difference and improve things when it comes to mental health as well. But I don't think I can really make a meaningful contribution there right now. I can't really add anything further to that. But the fourth point, I actually find that very interesting, and in my experience, it's definitely something you can back up. Not statistically, but just based on how I've perceived it. And that is decision-making processes and opportunities for participation. So, opportunities for participation can also be present in decision-making processes. But you can also look at it more generally. And here, I'd like to refer to the self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan, which I've mentioned many times before. It's also the most significant theory when it comes to psychological or psychologically based motivation. There are these 3 circles that basically have to interact with each other. Autonomy. So, as people, we want to be able to make our own decisions, not just function like robots. We want the second circle, competence. That means we want to be capable of something. And I think that's something we always need to keep in mind. A lot of managers still think people are just chess pieces that simply move around. And the third point, which is really important, or the third circle, is social connectedness. And so, when I talk about opportunities for participation, social connectedness is actually already combined with autonomy and competence. And with that, we've basically overlapped the three circles. And that's an essential part of motivation. And maybe, just to jump ahead a bit now, to Robert S. Hartman, who not only founded formal axiology, but also got involved very early on. He was involved in the association of entrepreneurs or companies that wanted to pay out a share of the profits to their employees, that is, profit sharing or variable pay, as everyone knows it today. So, in a way, Hartman is something of a father of that. And he even wrote down a catchy, mathematical equation for it in one of his seminars. And it goes like this, he wrote it on the board. 100 minus 50 equals 175. And of course, he laughs at that himself and says, in elementary school, we'd get a failing grade for that. 100 minus 50 is definitely not 175. So what does he say? What's the meaning behind it? He says the first 100, that's the profit in year one, or in year A, of the company we're talking about. It was also a company owned by a friend of his, an entrepreneur who always thought, hey, I can motivate my people, my employees, much more if I give them incentives. And if there's participation, if they have a share in what comes out in the end, then I could give them something back. And all the advisors warned him. But Hartman said, just go for it, and then what happens next? So, that's 100 minus 50. Basically, he said, 100% is the profit, so to speak, and I, as the entrepreneur, get 50%, and I pay out 50% to my staff. So, then it says, equals 175. What does that mean? And the 175 is the following year. And what was behind it was that people gave so much of themselves that sales increased by 40% and profits by 75%. And that's how you get the 175%. That means a lot more was achieved. And I mean, even current studies show that. And you just have to. Just look at Gallup, the survey that always shows how many people aren't engaged. I think, on average, people only deliver about 60% of what they're capable of. And just imagine if they delivered 90%, what could be achieved then? And that's exactly what he did and also tried to do. So, the higher the respondents rated those four aspects I just mentioned, cooperative atmosphere, crisis management, creativity, and the resulting improvements, as well as decision-making processes and opportunities for participation, the less often illnesses played a role in the company. So, that's really, I find that very significant. In companies where employees rated future viability more positively, there was an average of 11.6 days of work absences. In comparison, in companies that were rated more negatively, the number of absence days was 16.2. So you can see, positivity and negativity also play a role here. And once again, it's clearly a leadership task. So, leaders are producers of, let's say, positivity. But please don't get me wrong here, positivity doesn't mean sugarcoating things. Of course, we have to face the negative, even when it's there. We have to look the brutal facts in the eye. But in the end, we have to believe in a good outcome. And if we don't believe in that, then you can forget about it. Then the negativity just keeps going, and with it, the positivity goes down the drain. My third point, going a bit further, what is actually scientifically proven? Yes, but what else can we do? So maybe it won't be enough to just work on these 4 points I just talked about. For example, beyond shaping working conditions, workplace health promotion could be supplemented with psychological services. And directly integrate these things into the company through workplace health management. I'd like to mention my partner in cooperation here, Harold Huber, from Retenken AG, who have exactly these aspects in their portfolio. Retenken stands for retention. How can I? So, basically, keep people with the company. And of course, health plays an extremely important role in that. And also to increase preventative offerings. Honestly, it really bothers me that we still refer to our traditional healthcare system as a repair shop. Like, okay, if nothing's wrong, then everything's fine, but comparatively, almost nothing is done to actually prevent anything from happening in the first place. Hartman, who also analyzed things very thoroughly, once told me many years ago at a conference in the US, yeah, the health industry is the fastest failing business in the US. So, at the end of the day, it's only about damage. But we really need to look at it from the other side. So, through preventative measures, not only does the well-being of employees improve, but both direct and indirect costs are also affected. For companies, these costs can be reduced, so, in summary, there's still a heck of a lot to do. But I do believe that the first step, creating awareness about the issue, has been achieved. But we need to shift that awareness a little. In my opinion, the awareness is still too focused on how bad things are, and not enough on the other side. Yeah, what can we do to turn what's bad into something positive? Yes, and we've seen a few aspects from research now, but also beyond that. And now, to wrap up, I'd like to touch on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values, which I believe contribute to the topic of mental health, both now and in the future. And the first value I want to mention is empathy. Folks, as I said earlier, we are socially connected. According to Deci and Ryan, that's a basic human need for every person. And when I feel understood, when I also try to understand others, that's when this connection, this sense of belonging, happens. And if I'm not interested in that, it really does get tough. And in our society, which is highly technologized on the one hand, but on the other hand also overly systematized, this leads to all kinds of alienation. Yeah, a lack of empathy. Yeah, actually, as Hartman says, a lack of love. So empathy is definitely a key factor that comes into play. My second point is meaning, purpose. So, when I understand what I'm doing it for. We just had another great workshop recently with the team using a fantastic model called the quant model, where it's about certain energies that drive the company forward and that view the company as a living organism, and not as a technocratic organizational chart system. And it's important to have something like a source of energy, in other words, the purpose, the mission the company has for society as well. So, creating meaning is also something where leaders are needed, so that everyone is right in the middle of it. Employees need to understand that. And coming from a sense of purpose, but also with a personal attitude, my third value here is intrinsic motivation. So I myself also have to try to be passionate and want to be passionate about what I do. We have, roughly speaking, 30,000 years in life if things go really well. And that's not that much. So, we really have to pay attention to that. Carpe diem, seize the day. It's about what we make of it. And in working life, not a single day comes back. So here, it's important to look at what I'm putting my energy into, what I'm passionate about. And my fourth value here is psychological safety. That means, as leaders, we need to make sure that people can say what they want in the group or in the company without being afraid. I don't even know if this has been empirically proven or not, how many people don't say what they're thinking, feeling, or would like to suggest, simply because they're afraid someone will say, that's a stupid idea, or, what nonsense, we've already thought that through ages ago, and so on. And that's totally underestimated, this psychological safety, because not everyone says, hey, here I am, now it's my turn, is extroverted, and thinks they know everything better. Those are the exceptions. You just notice them all the time because they stand out. I have to create a foundation so that even the introverted person, even the shy person, feels free and comfortable, and feels safe to say something within the group. And only then, with everyone's contributions, do we really arrive at a good result. And then my last value here in this context, which isn't even a final one, I just brainstormed a bit about the topic, is the value of fairness. When it comes to this topic, it's the value of fairness. So, having the feeling, hey, here it doesn't matter who knows whom or if there's any favoritism going on, but rather there's a certain transparency and effort is actually rewarded. And it goes in the direction that everyone is treated equally So, everyone is treated equally in the sense that the rules apply to everyone and not just some people who can slip through the cracks. Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. It's a fantastic topic. Many thanks to Hannah, who did an absolutely amazing job preparing this episode. And then I just added my own perspective, sharing from my experience and stories. And now, just a little request for you all here at the end. Please feel free to leave a rating on Spotify or in your podcast player, and make sure to follow Profiling Values on LinkedIn. We've actually managed to gain an incredible number of new followers in just 1 year. If things keep going like this, we'll soon hit 2,000. And of course, I'm happy about every new follower and every new listener, too. And every listener as well. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It's great that you stayed interested in this topic right to the end. And now I hope you'll tune in again very soon. And yes, I'm already looking forward to producing the next episodes with lots of interesting guests. So, see you then. Bye.